Evening, folks. How's it going out there? Welcome back here to a Wednesday night, September 3rd, 2025. Here's the date, 9:09 p.m. That's West Coast time here in California. Latest activity shows a 3.4 earthquake across the Turkey area. Quite a bit of aftershock activity out there, to say the least. Got literally hundreds and hundreds of aftershocks going on there across that area of western Turkey, from a 6-pointer that stirred up out there a number of weeks ago. Definitely some interesting activity stirring up. Let's go ahead and check out the Alaska area first, where earlier this afternoon, early evening time period, we had this is afternoon here, 6.0 earthquake, the Aleutian Trench of Alaska. That is west of the Sand Point earthquake activity, that 7-pointer that struck out there about a month and a half ago. I believe it was a 7.3 that struck out here. And it's in the zone here. I want to show you guys the historical model real quick. Stand by for just a second. It's in a zone of absence of earthquake activity in terms of historical decent movement. So the earthquake activity out here, roughly about this location eastward, is an area I'm watching closely here for possible larger movement. The Aleutian Trench has been under the gun, so to speak, in terms of quite a bit of adjustment out here recently. And it only makes sense here as things strain across certain areas that we may see other regions out here continue that strain progression. And it does look like we're seeing that activity stir up here in that quiet zone. There was one earthquake back here, 7.3 in 2011, but absent of earthquake activity here. I pulled up to roughly about 1980 forward in terms of 7.0 and above. Well, because that's a little bit of time to build up some strain out here. Obviously, we've seen some larger activity here recently, the 8.2 in 2021, the more recent 7.3. But this area I'm watching closely here. Notice that seismic gap. That's what you look for in terms of maybe figuring out where some larger activity will take place. But we got a decent swarm going on there. There's that 6-pointer, a number of earthquakes prior and previous to it. Also quite a bit of activity here around the Sand Point, Alaska. That could be some aftershock activity from that 7-pointer. But there's been another area of interest out here as well across this region, near Old Harbor area. So a number of regions here along the Aleutian Trench that, man, they're way above normal activity out here in terms of the daily counts or even the weekly counts out here for earthquake activity. So we do need to watch that region. One thing I've noticed here, the 7-day earthquake activity shows nothing out here. The 30 days, a little absent of earthquake activity out here as well. So we do need to watch a couple regions out here along the Aleutian Trench. Over here for sure. And then, pretty much anywhere out here along the Aleutian Trench is capable of producing some mega quakes. The last recorded large event out here along this segment that's got some absence of earthquake activity was a 7.7 in 2017. 7.1 1990, 7.3 2018. So maybe not too concerned with this area, even though it's quiet, but definitely in this zone right here where we're lacking some major adjustment across that area. So keep an eye on it. It's been a hot spot of earthquake activity here recently. Checking into the Pacific Northwest, a couple earthquakes out there around Mount Rainier. It does look like they've added a couple earthquakes this morning, including a little 0.2. I think word's getting around here, you know. Believe it or not, there's quite a few USGS geologists here that watch my YouTube channel. Whether they're fans or not, I don't know, but they do watch it. And I'm sure they're probably, considering maybe adding some of the smaller quakes that are actually happening out there. Let's go over here to the Mount Rainier seismograph stations real quick and see if we can spot that earthquake that they reported at 11:46, a little 0.2. Because that was not there this morning, I don't believe. So here's the most recent activity. We got to go back here in the previous run to check out the earthquake activity at 11:46. That's going to be up there around that seismograph station, very close to the seismograph station, so that should show up. 11:46 a.m. That would match. So here's the 11 o'clock hour. Here's noon. $11:46 technically would be maybe this little spike here. See that in the little blue, in the blue thin line here? Is that right? 11:46. It's it's a very shallow earthquake. That's the only one that I can see. I see some activity here following that into the noon hour, just before 1 o'clock. A couple other, I mean, there's literally tons and tons of earthquake activity that I see here. But at 11:46, that would match. Here's the red time of noon. That's got to be somewhere around here. So how is that an earthquake, but everything else is not earthquakes? You know, they say this other activity is noise or ice quakes. If anything, I would think that earthquake there that they're showing as a little event as an ice quake. But what about this event? What about that event? You know, I could point out 20 or 30 or more events here that look like earthquakes. It's a little odd, you know. Who gets to decide that, you know, that's an earthquake, folks? Let's go ahead and publish that. What about all these other events out here? I just don't get it. It's a little odd, to say the least. So I do believe that swarm is still continuing there, but just on a slower scale. I really don't think that they're reporting all the earthquakes out there. There's a little 0.7, not a 7 magnitude. If we had a 7 out there around Mount St. Helens, that would be kind of bad news, I think. That's out there towards the northeastern flank here of the volcano this afternoon. So I want to double check, see if we can see that earthquake as well across Mount St. Helens here. And I believe we can double check this seismograph station if it works. Sugar Bowl, not California, but up in Washington. 1700. What is that? That was at 1351. Yeah, we got more activity in Alaska right now. Just got another earthquake there up in the Aleutian Trench. But there's a 0.7 this afternoon, so we got to go back here. $13.51, so just before 1400 here. So that would be this blue line. Is it going to be this earthquake? 1351. That would match that. 1351 today. 0.7, close to the seismograph station I just pulled up. That's got to be the earthquake here. What about all these other ones? Similar to Mount Rainier, you know, if that's an earthquake, then obviously all these other signals that are showing up similar or larger are earthquakes. Definitely some odd activity out here recently across the volcanoes of the Cascades. I don't think we have anything in terms of inflation going on across Mount St. Helens, but we will double check. You know, you just never know. Some weird stuff going on out here recently. And that's over there across the northeastern corner. This is fairly recent. I don't see any uptick aside from the seasonal inflation going on there. Kind of the ground acting as a sponge, so to speak, when the rain melts or the snow melts and whatnot. If anything, here on the deformation data, we're going down. So that's been a trend out here over the last few years. All right, we'll go past that. Either way, some earthquake activity, and I think there's a lot. Some activity around Mount Hood as well, towards the southern area. Nothing going on across Cascadia. One earthquake now, surprisingly below the 2.5 threshold. I think they just threw that up all of a sudden here. 1.8. That's probably off the chart by now. That occurred here within the last hour. Nothing big going on. By the way, Cascadia tremor map. Let's see what we got here for the latest data. shows two. Wow, that's actually a decent uptick and more confined here across the southern end. We do got to watch that, folks. You know, I talk about the Cascadia events out here quite often. Let me show you real quick, okay? Let's pull this back up. See if I have it. Cascadia timeline. This is a really interesting article here that I think we should pay close attention to when it comes to trends, right? Everything's about trends out here. When it comes to earthquakes, they could follow or basically, you know, reenact past events here. What tends to happen out there along major subduction zones, along plate tectonics. But our last event was back in 1700, right? A 9.0, which ruptured the entire Cascadia. Here we are 325 years later. That gap here between that last event and our current time, this is actually if they state this was 315 years ago, then this chart is 10 years old. So we're technically a little bit further along this chart. And if you look here, man, you really can't say that we have a long ways to go before we see the Cascadia rupture out here. 6,500 to 6,000 back there. Yeah, there is a pretty significant gap. But if you notice here, there's been a lot of earthquake activity along the Cascadia here in the last several thousand years, and it doesn't look like it's letting up. But not only the big earthquakes occur out here, right, but also the potential for partial ruptures across the southern end. If you notice here, in between major ruptures exist partial ruptures of the southern end of the Cascadia, resulting in up to an 8.2 or so, maybe a little bit higher in certain areas. 8.3 for that one, 8.1. And then look at this here. Partial rupture at 1400 AD, and then 68 years later, a full rupture. So here we are with no rupture activity along the Cascadia in 325 years. So, yeah, it's coming up. It only makes sense here. It's not a fairy tale. This is definitely something we need to watch closely along the Cascadia here. I've been watching this tremor activity here over the years, and it's had its periods here of elevated tremor counts and whatnot, but over the last, I would say 2 years or so, we've seen an odd change of tremor counts out here. So instead of quietness followed up by elevated activity, it's just been more consistent in terms of tremor activity here over the last 2 years. As you can see here on the chart, it's denser in terms of the number counts. What that means, who knows? I do think, though, we need to watch this closely. The tremor activity is not a sign here that strain is relieving and releasing along this major subduction zone. The tremor activity occurs down below, deeper into the subduction zone of the Cascadia, resulting in further strain across the locked area. And right now, that is pretty well focused across the southern end, Northern California, southern Oregon. Pretty dense amount of tremor activity here in the last. This goes back to about June or so. No huge spikes, but it's been a dense amount of tremor activity, resulting in 12,924 epicenters of tremor. And that pretty much paints a picture of the Cascadia out here. So it's I do think it's pretty well locked and loaded and ready for the next big rupture out here. That could be why we're seeing elevated earthquake activity across a number of volcanoes across the Cascade range. Gotta watch that, folks. I'm concerned about this myself because I live out here in the Sacramento Valley, northern end of the Sacramento Valley, and that would do quite a bit of shaking out here. What is going on with that? Let me see here. I wanted to look and see if I have an image here of the, there we go. This is a decent little image. Maybe, maybe not. Are we going to get to view it? Are you going to let me see it? It's a little small, but let's bring this up here a little bit. Okay, so this is just a scenario. Man, get rid of that. I'm not interested in politics or news. Scenario for a 9.0 out here along the entirety of the Cascadia. So that would result in a full rupture. This is the shake map, not to mention the tsunami and land drop out here, but just a scenario. We're talking about, look at the coast range out here up through Seattle. Severe to violent shaking. My neck of the woods here, here's the Sutter Buttes, that little dot. I'm up here closer to the orange, so very strong. I have a feeling that it wouldn't be good around here along the coastline. You're talking about, big time damage. This land is supposed to drop 6 to 7 feet or so because it's been raising up. It kind of folds up on itself here because of the subduction that's going on between the North American and the Juan de Fuca plate. So the coastal range has been rising since 325 years ago, but that will drop, and it's not going to be a pretty picture out here across the entirety of the west coast, about San Francisco northward. And that's just that's a full rupture. Partial rupture, an 8-pointer out here would definitely be just as damaging, I think, here locally to southern Oregon and northern California, southern coast of Oregon, that is. But that's just a little scenario. As you can see, it extends well inland, Eugene, Salem, Portland, all the way up to the Cascades. The Cascades kind of block the seismic wave eastward, but they'll still feel it out there. And I really think here that we may see this in our lifetime just because of the amount of time that has passed and the tremor activity, the way it's been occurring here recently with not as intense daily counts, but more drawn out here in the last couple years. So we just got to be prepared here, folks. We can't just be thinking that it's never going to happen in my lifetime. You're just fear-mongering. It's crazy amount of comments I get out here, but I do appreciate the reinforcement of the positive comments. San Francisco area, pretty quiet. Not a whole lot going on there now. Yeah, this earthquake activity is on the Parkfield section here, it looks like. Right at the interchange here of the creeping section where it transverses here to the Parkfield segment. There was a 1.2 earthquake this morning. This area is primed for a 6-pointer at least. Regular intervals here run between 20 and 22 years for 6.0 and above. Our last one, yeah, you got it, 2004. So here we are. Definitely looking like we'll see a 6-pointer out here. There's been some linkage, so to speak, historically, where they found that the Cascadia subduction zone, when it ruptures, will rupture the San Andreas Fault as an entirety out here, resulting in a bigger earthquake, and vice versa. That large of an earthquake along the San Andreas Fault could potentially trigger the Cascadia as well. When everything's so primed and ripe, so to speak, for some larger earthquake activity, and so many years have passed, bad things can happen out here. So we do have to be on guard. Watch the Parkfield section closely. The rest of Southern California out there, a little spotty, not too much going on there for earthquake activity. One earthquake out there in the Milford, Utah area, 2.1. Nevada area, still seeing some earthquake activity. I don't think this is associated with that super volcano, McDermott super volcano up here. I do believe this is just tectonic stress out here. But we'll definitely continue to watch that. Yellowstone National Park, one earthquake from this morning, but let's just go double check that, see what we have this evening. I know there's a lot of doom and gloom, but hey, we live on a planet that is very capable of providing us doom and gloom, and we live in an area here on the West Coast very capable of providing that doom and gloom. The thing is, we need to be prepared for that doom and gloom, so to speak. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity happening. There was an event out there at around 2 or 1 o'clock or so. What was that? I think that was the Alaska earthquake. Yeah, that's at 1400. Yeah, that would match that because there's 1400 right there. So that was definitely after that. That's going to be that 6-pointer in Alaska. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity there locally across Yellowstone National Park there for now. One earthquake coming into the San Antonio de los Cobres, Argentina area. Look at that super deep earthquake into the subduction zone right now. 5.9. Almost a 6-pointer. This morning's update there kind of talked about how quiet it was, and then things started to move throughout the afternoon, and they're still continuing. There's times where things are in limbo, so to speak, out here, but looks like we're starting to get going here. I think it's going to be an active night. Literally, is that 10 seconds prior? There was a 5.1, and then 10 seconds later, a 5.9. Interesting activity. Let's see. Do I have a Chile station down here? I don't know if I do or not. Let me bring this up here real quick. See if I can add the Chile station down here. These are just seismograph stations out here. One station here works fairly well in Chile if I can get it to load up, which is not working. So yeah, they're offline, or at least there's a bug in this system. It is pretty much an what's a word for it? It's an app that used to be popular. Now they've just forgotten about it, but it still works surprisingly. But it's not reinforced in terms of, upgrades and stuff like that. It's the Global Earthquake Explorer, but it's still able to access the seismograph station, so that's all that matters. But 5.1, 10 seconds later, 5.9. Definitely some movement going on there along the Peru Chile Trench. The rest of the states up here, pretty quiet aside from oil fields rocking and rolling. 4.1 down here, fairly new quake. There's quite a bit of activity there off the coast of Mexico as well. That may increase further activity along the Southern California region. I do know someone mentioned there about the Morocco earthquake. That I kind of covered last night. I don't know if you guys caught my update last night, but yeah, there was a 4.5. That was at almost 8:30 my time. So I did cover that last night in my last night update video. I didn't cover it this morning because obviously I had covered it the night before. So I seen a few comments there on my most recent update saying, "How come you didn't cover the Morocco earthquake?" Well, we did. It was a little bit. Probably didn't catch it, but that's okay. But we definitely got some large-scale movement taking place here. A lot of activity up in Alaska. Now some newer, deeper movement into the Peru Chile Trench. Some newer activity there along the... that's going to be off the coast of El Salvador area. Maybe Nicaragua region. Down here across this area, there's a decent earthquake coming in. So we got a lot going on here. A lot of shuffling going on. We do have to watch this area of the plate boundaries out there, with this movement happening north and south. Down across the New Zealand area, some 3 stirring up, some larger activity, a 5 range up around the Tonga Trench. There's a lot more activity happening out here than what was going on this morning. Some newer activity around the Mariana Trench, movement around Japan. Things are on the shuffle right now. We're definitely getting moving. So keep an eye on certain areas. I do think we need to watch that quiet seismic gap zone of the Aleutian Trench up here. Roughly extends around this region eastward here to where the 7.3 struck earlier back in July. So that's a prime spot here for some larger activity. Got a lot of activity here across Hawaii, man. It's a little unusual to see this much earthquake activity scattered out and about across the region. 2.2 fairly deep there. There is a 2.7 deep, 1.5 deep as well. Pretty shallow earthquake across Mauna Loa. That was this afternoon, 2.0. There's something going on here, you know, across the big island of Hawaii. Of course, it's not always going to stay the same with the rinse and repeat cycle of eruptions out there across Kilauea Volcano. That's going to change here, I think. We may see the beginnings of that change right now with regards to the elevated earthquake activity. But on the deformation data, we're still seeing the rise here. This is the inflation chart across the Kilauea Volcano. Here's our most recent eruption that, you know, depleted quite a bit, more so than the other ones, and now we're starting to go back up in terms of inflation. But I do think things are changing out here in terms of the hot spot that Hawaii is. So we'll have to watch that. Not a whole lot of activity stirring up northward or ahead of it, you know, where the next island chains will be appearing over the, you know, lots and lots of years. There's the former Hawaii chains as they've progressed and the Pacific plates moved about. But this will continue on this way, and these will no longer be. Again, that's going to be a long time from now. I don't think we'll be here. But still a little bit going on there underneath the big island. We'll continue to watch that and see what plays out. But I'm interested in these two earthquakes here. That has been reviewed, so that's a legit earthquake. And this one here has been reviewed as well. So almost looks like there's been, you know, two decent sized earthquakes out there across this area of the San Antonio de los Cobres, Argentina region, into the subduction zone of the Peru-Chile Trench. Just down south here is where the world's largest earthquake ever struck back in 1961, I believe, the Great Chilean Earthquake of a 9.5. That was down here southwest of the Santiago, Chile area. So this subduction zone is very capable of producing that magnitude and possibly greater. Space weather activity, well, man, not a whole lot of aurora activity, right? We do have a massive coronal hole that's facing somewhat to the south. Not so much here Earth directed. It's got a southward tilt. I don't think that's going to provide anything. It almost looks like they added it up here on the map to account for that high-speed solar wind stream. But most of the time when that stirs up along this area of the sun, when it's pointing south, that doesn't really occur. But it looks like maybe a G1 class storm on the 6th here in a number of days after that high-speed solar wind stream arrives to the planet. But again, I think it's going to shoot south of us. No major solar flares. That active sunspot area out here in the southwestern area of the sun is it's a large area. Don't get me wrong, that's pretty big, but it's behaving. You know, it's like the black sheep out here. It's got some potential, but it's behaving while it's facing the Earth. And tomorrow, next couple days here, that will be no longer visible. And we're left with a lot of disorganized sunspots out here. So this one here looks like it's growing, but it's getting a little bit of separation here between the magnetic polarities here of that sunspot. So I guess we'll kind of keep an eye on things here, see what happens. Flare threat has dropped. I think there's more of a C to M flare chance than an X flare. I've dropped my X flare to a 5% chance. M flare around 50% chance or so. Just kind of dying off out here. No major auroras there in the forecast. Quick glance here at the numerical models. Got kind of watching this hurricane out here in the Atlantic. Let me go back one run here and see what we got. There's some type of tropical system out there that was showing a near, well, let's see, now it's even different here, but it's still getting close to the land here as far as the East Coast goes. Around the middle of September, we're going to have to watch this. The run time this morning showed a direct impact as a major hurricane there around the Carolinas. But this model showing what looks like a little backing off, but still clipping here a portion of the East Coast. We'll have to watch that. These things can change from model run to model run, but the thing is, the models are picking up on something big out there in the Atlantic around the middle of September. So we do need to watch that closely. All right, let's see. Anything else major going on out here? Do gotta look at this. 2 earthquakes out there. That's interesting. 2 decent size and deep as well. So watch the Peru Chile Trench. These deeper quakes out here can sometimes add, well, they do add further strain out there along the locked area of the subduction zone, resulting in larger earthquake activity. All right, folks, have yourself a good one. We'll catch you guys out here a little bit later tomorrow for the Thursday morning update. Stay safe out there.